Hello, how are we tonight? Howie, it's good to see you.
Good to be here.
Leland, do we have you? Stream's working. All right. So it's about 6:30. Thank you to everyone who's here for our monthly Democratic Socialists of Salt Lake general meeting. It's good to see everybody's smiling faces and profile pictures and various other things. We've got a real treat for you. We have Mr. Howie Hawkins, who is a candidate for president for the Green Party. So everyone, welcome to Howie. It's a real pleasure to have him with us. It's a real privilege for us. So thank you so much for that. I think we've still got people trickling in a little bit. It's only barely 6:30. And Phelan, you said the stream was running properly? Okay. So we've got, first up, we have introductions for Howie and Angela. Are you planning on doing that yourself, Howie, or?
Well, I was just getting the link because I don't see Angela on.
Yeah, I'm not seeing.
I'm going to email her the link and give her a little phone call. She may be getting just off work. Let me do that, and then I can start my introduction. Okay, she don't have her voicemail box set up, but she usually calls me right back. So you want me to introduce myself?
If you'd like, we could wait. It looks like we're still having people get in here.
Sure, how do you do it?
We can wait for a few more minutes.
Hey, Angela. Okay, so you'll be on in a few minutes? Okay. All right. Bye. Yeah, she just got in off work. It's a hot, sweaty job. She wanted to jump in the shower, so she'll be with us shortly.
I think this is a shower after work kind of crowd. So I
Okay.
think we all understand. And if we could, everyone should be able to have a chance to speak eventually, but if we could all at the start of the meeting have our mics muted to start out with. So for those of us who are just joining, we are currently waiting for Angela, and then we'll be getting started with introductions and with the interview. So that's where we're at.
There's Angela.
Right. Angela, hi. Now we can get this started. So I'm Elliot. I am, by the grace of God, I suppose, the one of the two chairs of this chapter of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of Salt Lake. So we're really happy to have Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker here. We're so proud to be hosting you. Hi to everybody who is watching wherever this is being streamed. It's great to see everybody here. And thank you to everybody out there. So we're going to start out with some introductions for Howie and Angela. Which one of you is first?
Me? Okay. So you're just looking who we are, or you want some of the platform too?
Whatever you feel is necessary, so that, if someone here doesn't really know very much about you, they can get a sense of why DSA maybe should or should not endorse you.
Okay. Well, my name's Howie Hawkins. I'm a recently retired Teamster. Before that, I did work in construction, but that was to pay the bills. I've been an activist since the 1960s, coming up in the San Francisco Bay Area, civil rights, anti-war, ecology, and became committed to independent politics then. In '64, the Republicans were trying to repeal fair housing in California and succeeded in an initiative referendum. And the Democrats sat the Dixiecrats instead of the Freedom Democrats from Mississippi. So I was asking, where's my party? And became committed at that time to independent working class politics for democratic socialism and ecology. And so I supported the Peace and Freedom Party, the People's Party, the Citizens Party, got invited to the first National Green organizing meeting in 1984 and argued there, which I still believe we got to build the party from the bottom up. We got to build local organizations and start in local politics and build a foundation. And then you got a good platform to go for state legislature and Congress. And stayed involved in the Green Party. The Greens in New York ran me statewide against Hillary Clinton for US Senator in 2006. In 2010, 2014, 2018, ran me for governor. And each time we got enough votes to get a ballot line. And I'm running now because a lot of Greens asked me to. And so why the hell am I running for president if I think we got to build this from the bottom up? Well, one thing is ballot lines enables us to run candidates much more easily than running as independents. It's orders of magnitude less signatures when you got a ballot line. And I can give you the numbers, but I'm not going to take a lot of time now. You can ask me later. But this country's off the charts and how difficult it is for third parties to get on a ballot. So that's one objective. In 40 of the 50 states, the percentage of the vote we get determines whether we have a ballot line for the next election cycle. And the other thing we're trying to do is get the Greens to stop being a memberless party like the Democrats and Republicans, where the state determines who the membership is because somebody just says, I'm in your party, no matter what their political beliefs. And that gives them the right to vote in primaries, but it doesn't give the party any accountability to its principles. So that creates difficulties. And if we're going to have a mass party with power, we got to have a membership-based party that's dues-paying party. So we have the resources. The Greens had that from the 80s until the mid-90s, and then there was a split, and we ended up with this federation of memberless state parties. And we defunded ourselves, and we lost a lot of our local base. So part of the purpose of my campaign is to talk to people about not just being activists. Greens are good activists. We show up when somebody else calls a demonstration. We're not good organizers. And by that, I mean not just organizing demonstrations, but reaching the people that are going to be the base for a mass-based independent left party. Working class people, disproportionately people of color and youth. That's the 100 million people that didn't vote in 2016. And that's the future of an independent left. So those are the organizing objectives. And then the policy objectives, I frame it around life or death issues. The climate crisis. I was the first candidate to campaign for a Green New Deal. And without going into the details, the Democrats took the slogan, diluted the content, and now have buried it. You're not going to get a Green New Deal from the Democratic Party, period. Second thing is inequality. Growing inequalities led to declining life expectancies for the working class. And that's inexcusable in a country as rich and developed as ours. So we're calling for an economic bill of rights. This is always part of our Green New Deal. And those rights should include a job guarantee, a guaranteed income above poverty, affordable housing, Medicare for all, lifelong public education from pre-K and childcare through post-secondary, college, trade school, and continuing adult education, and then a secure retirement. We want to double Social Security benefits so every senior's got an income above the poverty line. Third one is the new nuclear arms race. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists has its doomsday clock the closest it's ever been to midnight. The US embarked on a nuclear modernization program under Obama. The Russians and the Chinese have followed suit. The balance of terror is now destabilized. So we're calling for peace initiatives, 75% cut in military spending, getting out of these endless wars abroad, withdrawing from our over 800 foreign military bases, pledging no first use of nuclear weapons, disarming nuclear weapons to a minimum credible deterrent, and then going to the other nuclear powers in the world and saying, we're not a threat anymore. Tensions are reduced. Let's negotiate complete and mutual nuclear disarmament. Go there with world public opinion. The 122 nations that agreed to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons 3 years ago. The International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons got the Nobel Peace Prize for that. And hardly anybody in this country knows that, because the political leadership of the two major parties and all their presidential candidates have not even addressed this issue, because they both support this nuclear modernization program. And then those are the three life or death issues we started with. Now we got the coronavirus crisis. And it shows that the two governing parties are presiding over a failed state. Trump, COVID won, Trump is a loser. He's a dummy. He's a childlike person who likes to make believe stuff. But Biden has the floor. He has the platform. He lives within commuter distance of the White House press corps. He could have been convening socially distanced news conferences to pound away at Trump on what we need: testing, tracing, quarantining the infected and those exposed to infections, so we can suppress community spread, go back to work and to school safely. And Biden's been sitting back, and I think that makes him complicit. While he got the press, he could be talking about defending the Postal Service, or extending the $600 a month or a week supplement to unemployment insurance, or the need for an optional mail-in ballot for everybody. Instead, he's largely been AWOL, and I think that makes him complicit in this whole crisis. And finally, this pandemic of racism, it's centuries old. People of color have understood it. Now a lot of white people understand it because it's in living color on their TV screens, these police murders. So Angela and I are saying, we got to do more than reform use of force policies and, get some better people or some more powers to these review boards. We got to have full community control of the police, because as long as they police themselves, they're going to get away with their crimes. We also call for ending the drug wars, legalizing marijuana and decriminalizing the hard drugs like they did in Portugal. So instead of it being a criminal charge for possession, you get a ticket to appear at a hearing with a lawyer, a doctor, and a social worker. And they try to deal with your situation. As a result, in Portugal, overdoses from deaths and HIV spread have basically stopped. There's no street-related drug crimes. And less people use hard drugs than before this was instituted 19 years ago. And finally, defund the police. There's not enough money in the police budgets to account for the impoverishment of racially oppressed communities that have been segregated, discriminated, and exploited for generations. So we need to defund the military too, and have a multi-trillion-dollar, multi-year investment in jobs, schools, healthcare, housing in these communities. And that's where the resources are going to come, because the police, they're not the ones that they shouldn't be giving vagrancy charges to a homeless. We need to find them a home. And the addicted need drug treatment. not a criminal charge, and so forth. So those are sort of the 5 life or death issues. And I went through them quickly, but I don't want to take any more time. And I want to introduce Angela to you, who I've known since 2014. And she was my first choice to be my running mate. And one of the best things that happened in the campaign is she said yes. So Angela, why don't you introduce yourself?
You are being exceptionally kind, Howie. Good evening to everybody. First off, I apologize for the lateness. I am still a dump truck driver by profession. It is summer and our hours are, this is when we run. So my work hours have gone from an average of 10.5 hours a day to an average of 12.5 hours a day. I have to be back at work at 4:30 in the morning. So here we go. I'm Angela Walker. I am a native of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I had the honor of being asked to be Howie Hawkins' running mate in late April. And I had sworn off politics. I ran as an independent socialist against former Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark. And if any of y'all are familiar with him, he's real interesting. And I'm gonna leave it at that. We took in that race 20% of the vote. For an unknown broke socialist, that's pretty significant. And that run caught the attention of the Socialist Party of the U.S. And I think that is really important, to know, when I ran as Milwaukee County Sheriff, one of the things that David Clark was very well known for was his absolute resistance to treating people like people, and also this which we see prevailing now, this really harsh punitive crime, we're hard on crime and things like that. And our platform was very similar to what I'm running on now. I mean, if you are interested in finding out what the roots of crime are, then let's look at poverty. Let's look at the fact that, when you take resources from communities, which they were doing, when you are privatizing public schools, when you're attempting to privatize public transit, when you're closing hospitals in the inner city, and you are reducing people's access to the things that they need to live and access to living wage work, you're going to have the problems that we were having in Milwaukee County and that they're still having. And so our platform was basically, you want to look at crime, let's start talking about poverty, and let's start talking about the ways in which racism, generational racism, structural racism has contributed to that. And if you know anything about Milwaukee, you know that it is one of the most segregated cities in the country to this day. And so we've got some pretty entrenched problems. And Milwaukee is also one of the most socialist cities in the country. I mean, Milwaukee was built, all the good things that made Milwaukee what it is were built by socialists. And so, I was very honored to be able to kind of be a link in the chain of that tradition. And like I said, we got 20% of the vote. And it caught the attention of the Socialist Party of the USA. My friend who recently transitioned, joined the ancestors in medial solstice, Mimi, asked me to be his running mate, and we did. And we talked about, as Howie mentioned, a red-green alliance back in 2014, and floated the idea because there is a natural synergy between linking the oppression of human beings under capitalism to the exploitation and abuse of this planet under capitalism. And so those things, for me, that was a natural synergy. And so to have Howie ask me to be his running mate, and, with eco-socialism as this platform, and, also lifting up, all of the things that he mentioned, it just made sense to me. So here I am, and welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Welcome to both of you. You both did a really good job, just for the record, I would say. I believe what we have next is some interview questions. So these are submitted by DSA members. We have a whole bunch of them, and I can't guarantee that we're going to be able to get through all of them. We're hoping to also have a little bit of time to take questions from the crowd if anybody has them, but we'll see how far we get, I suppose. So the first two questions I have are for Angela specifically. And the first one of those is right in line with what you were just talking about. This person says, I know you ran for sheriff and received 20% of the vote in Milwaukee. My question is, do you see liberal reform as enough to fix the police, or would you advocate for abolition beyond reform? If you wouldn't advocate for full abolition of the police, how are your proposed reforms substantive for BIPOC Americans?
The things that we ran on initially, at least in that campaign, were, I would say, harm reduction. And what I was able to, or be able to do within the scope of what the sheriff's duties are. As far as this campaign, I think we could go a lot further. I don't believe in topical reforms. I believe that this system itself is inherently, well, it's corrupt, it's flawed. It was flawed at its inception, because the Constitution people are always holding up. We have to be very honest about the fact that it was not intended to include, people who were not white landowning males. So, when you're talking about reforming, there's certain things that need to be overhauled, and this system is one of them. The fact that capitalism absolutely has to have an underclass, which y'all know, and this is where we are. You can't fix this system. You have to completely undo it. And so I am interested, and I would be working toward the eventual abolition of police and prisons, because I think we can do a better job of addressing, I think, a lot of what we're seeing people being locked up for. This isn't crime. I mean, I think it's, and Howie, says this a lot too, about the fact that 5% of what happens in this country is classified, is violent crime. What our jails are and prisons are full of people are, it's drug stuff, it's prostitution, it's mental health issues, it's things that people should not be incarcerated for. And so I think that eventually, abolition is our goal. And I think that we can, and it's not going to be an overnight thing, but I think that you're going to have to, to have that as a goal. So yeah, I support abolition.
All right, thank you so much for that. These following questions are for Howie or Angela. So we've got quite a few of these, all of which are coming from members. The first one, and this one I really like, I've got a new job, full disclosure, where I'm going to, in a few weeks, I will be a Teamster right along with Howie. So I'm really excited for that. And this person wants to know, how would you contribute to unions and empower workers in the workplace? So either of you guys want to field that, or you folks want to field that?
Okay, Angela nodded at me, pointed at me. Well, I think the first thing we need to do as workers is form informal networks in the workplace with people who are like-minded, and even those who are not. Build friendships, relationships, and when issues come in that are job-related, then you got some people to talk to and find out who the informal leaders are. There's always somebody or a few people that others look to for just, what are we going to do about this? What do you think? And just so get to know who those people are, because they're key to any organizing any action. Now, within the Teamsters, you should become a member of Teamsters for a Democratic Union, which has been fighting the Hoffa regime with a brief interlude with Ron Kerry back in the 90s. And there's another election coming up. I don't know if you'll be able to vote in it in time, but you know, you can help campaign for that. And they're reform candidates. They are not radicals, but they're better than Hoffa. But I don't think we're going to transform the unions into real rank and file controlled democratic unions that are social movement unions in solidarity with each other and other social movements, instead of being the business unions they are right now. You know, a lot of people in their unions look at it like an insurance company. You pay your dues like you do an insurance premium or your healthcare premium, and you get a benefit. They don't educate politically. They don't mobilize and organize their own members. When they do fight the boss, they bring in consultants and do corporate campaigns. And the real reason for that is that the leadership, which is elected in various degrees of democracy, depending on the union, they don't want to organize membership that might elect some new leadership. That's a structural problem that you got to deal with. So I don't think we're going to really, and I've been in TDU for a long time. It's been around since the 70s. And there's been some other caucuses and other unions, and they've made some progress. But I don't think until we have a mass-based left party with an organized program to systematically go into the unions and organize and defend themselves from the kind of red baiting that got the left out in the 40s, it's going to be really hard to transform the unions. I think the most interesting activity is going on in the worker centers with people that are in low-wage jobs, sweatshops, farm work, and day labor, that kind of thing. And a lot of those are immigrants who come from much more militant labor traditions in their home countries. In terms of policy, I think we should fight for a worker bill of rights that protects our right to privacy in the workplace, our rights to First Amendment rights, you know, when we're off the job on breaks and on lunchtime. We should have the right to enforce OSHA and other regulations, so that we should have the right to delegate inspectors who can shut down production or at least find out what we're working with. And because OSHA's, you couldn't build a big enough OSHA to watch what's going on in these workplaces. So we need to deputize workers to enforce those laws, or at least call in OSHA rather than relying on management. Card check. You know, majority of people sign a card, they want a union, a collective bargaining unit, and they get it. And there's, you know, that was something promised by Obama twice, and he broke that promise. Second time very blatantly. Even Hoffa was offended. Taft-Hartley, that goes back to the 40s. It really limited labor's ability to work in solidarity with secondary boycotts and political strikes, solidarity strikes, and that kind of thing. Those provisions should be repealed. The Hatch Act needs to be reformed so it doesn't affect, limit public workers' ability to participate in elections like other citizens. Just cause. When you have a job, you should not be fired so the boss's nephew can take your job. It has to be for a legitimate reason. And that's common in Europe. It's also the law in Montana, of all places. And that's something we should bring to this country. So there's a lot we can do with labor law reform, but I think the most important thing, and I'm part of the Labor Notes Network, which tries to bring these reform caucuses together. Their slogan is, let's put the movement back in the labor movement. And that's probably more important even than legislation we can get changed. Although we get the movement going, we'll get that legislation.
All right. Angela, anything to add?
The only thing that I would add to that is and how I alluded to it before, is the fact that labor has lost its way as a movement, and in gatekeeping and making sure that certain people in certain professions, certain, you know, ethnicities were shut out of work, it set us up for not having the support that we need as a movement. And I think that it's very important right now, especially at this moment in history, you've got a rebellion happening, you've got a pandemic happening, you've got widespread unemployment and like economic instability for a whole lot of people. I think this is an opportune time for labor to be rethinking the way that it moves and, you know, going back to its roots. And it's like Howie said, you know, they're business unions. They don't really have any incentive. And so it's going to come from, you know, those of us on the ground who are workers and want to change that. But I think we're going to have to get reacquainted with labor history, because so many people have no idea, you know, how hard won the benefits that those of us who actually have them in this country, how we got them. Even something as simple now as an 8-hour workday, which is something I don't even know anything about at this point. But we need to re-educate people about labor history and, you know, go back to that history to make the labor movement relevant to all people and organize all workers instead of cherry picking who's okay and who's not, and whose work is valuable and who's not. Get everybody.
And I would just add that Angela is a great example of a rank and file worker that took the initiative, and in her case got recognized by the leadership of her local. Back in 2011, when the Wisconsin uprising broke out, Walker exempted transit workers, police, and fire. But she started bringing people from her local transit workers union in Milwaukee to Madison to join the struggle in solidarity. And in recognition of that, her president said, okay, you're the legislative director of this local. And then she got him involved in the Occupy movement. And because of that, that's why people wanted to run for sheriff against Crazy Dave Walker. So that's an example. You don't have to be the elected president or whatever. You take initiative, and if people come along with you, you get something going. And so don't wait till you got the title to take the initiative. And so Angela's modest. I wanted people to know she's speaking from experience.
All right, well, thank you both for that. We have another member who is interested. What is your position on the Iran nuclear treaty, the now abrogated Iran nuclear treaty?
We should try to get it going again. The U.S. should get back into it and apologize to Iran for Donald Trump pulling us out.
All right. Anything to add, Angela? All right. This person says, I asked Nader the same question back in 2008 because it is relevant to the circumstances of my family. Is illegal immigration truly a problem? And if so, what's the solution?
Well, I think everybody without documents should be given documents and made legal. We should empty the detention centers and provide services so people get housing, employment, education, healthcare, and immediately let them go through the process that the Trump administration has gummed up and blocked. And that includes the people camped out on the Mexican side of the border. They won't even let come in and apply. But our long-term policy, which we don't want to be a long time from now, but that's things we can do immediately, is open borders. The right of freedom of movement is a basic human right. It's in the UN Declaration of Human Rights with respect to within countries. And back then they were looking at internal passports in South Africa and Russia and China. But in a globalized economy, the national borders play the same role that the Bantustans did in South Africa. I mean, Mexico is basically a Bantustan. And they use the low wages there to threaten workers here. And they use the border to divide workers across borders. And no, people should be able to move back and forth across the border for shopping, recreation, jobs, and residence. And then people say, well, everybody's going to move to the United States. No, they're not. Look at Europe. They have freedom of movement within the EU. They have basically open borders. And Greece is on its back, but not all the Greeks moved to Germany. Maybe some family members did, and they're sending money back to their families in Greece. People want to live where they're at. They only move, most people, when it becomes, dangerous or impossible to survive. So I think those are some of our positions. I see somebody say abolish ICE. Yes, sir, or ma'am. And Border Patrol too. Border Patrol, we know that half of those 20,000 agents were on that racist Facebook page. And they're the ones that volunteered to go to Portland. They're the ones that let themselves be used as props at that crime scene on the West Lawn when Trump gave a speech last Thursday. So we need to dismantle those agencies and have a new immigration agency that would humanely administer the laws we have and the laws we're going to make to have open borders.
And I think it also ties into us being honest as a country about the effects that imperialism has had on destabilizing countries to where people are being forced to migrate. The fact that this country has undermined, democratic elections in other folks' countries and has meddled in people's economies. And also, I think that it's important to be aware that, a lot of focus comes to, folks in the Americas as far as immigration, but there's a whole lot of folks here, from the Caribbean that immigrate, and folks from Africa that immigrate, and folks from Asia that immigrate. And I believe in, being world citizens, and that migration is a human right. And, I want a climate of cultural exchange around the world where the United States is not meddling and destabilizing other people's countries so they have to move. That when they come here, there's an exchange and things like that. So I just think that we also have to be honest in how we got here and clean that up, which links into our peace policies.
All right, thank you. And I really have loved so far the way you both have been able to articulate the connections between the issues. It feels like we end up talking about the next question before I ask it. So, and then that's this too. Our next question, we have a member who asks, do you see the Green New Deal as a socialist transitional state? If not, are you in favor of enacting the beginnings of one? If so, would you enact it without party leadership involved?
Well, I'll see it as, definitely transition towards socialism. It's the first steps, the things we got to do now. Our eco-socialist Green New Deal is about socializing the energy, transportation, and manufacturing sectors. We got to do similar to what we did in the World War II emergency when the federal government took over or built a quarter of the manufacturing capacity of the country in order to turn industry on a dime into the arsenal of democracy, to arm the allies to defeat the fascists. And we need to do nothing less through the public sector to defeat climate change. And when you get energy, transportation, and manufacturing in the public sector, you've basically made the socialist mode of production dominant. So I think, that's a big step toward democratic socialism. And it takes over the key industries that we would need. Now, there are others, but that comes when we talk about Medicare for all, we talk about it being not just socialized payment of medical services that's privately delivered. We're talking about socializing delivery as well, so that hospitals and clinics would be publicly owned. Doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers would be public employees. They'd be salaried rather than trying to maximize fees for services and being pushed to do so by hospital and insurance corporations. And it would be democratically controlled because we'd elect local health boards that would make sure the resources are allocated to all the communities in a district, and that we rationally, utilize the resources, and then they federate at the state and national level to coordinate. And that would include socializing big pharma. which right now relies on socialized research, publicly funded research. And then they, take some of the findings, patent the drug, and make private profits from it. But they're not doing the basic research in serious issues. They like Viagra that people got to use all the time, and diabetes medicine and insulin and that kind of thing. But they don't like vaccines that you don't need to keep paying for. So they don't do the research on antibiotics and antivirals. And that's where the danger comes. Now we got this coronavirus pandemic. So I think between the Green New Deal, including the Economic Bill of Rights, socializing the medical sector, that's almost a fifth of the economy. We're going to have a lot of the economy under Democratic control.
And I'll just say
I
this
didn't-
oh, go ahead.
I didn't get the part about party leadership. I didn't understand that part of the question. So
I didn't quite understand that either, but yeah, so I would say don't worry about that. Anything?
Angela was about to say something.
No, I was just going to comment on, what I think you made abundantly obvious. This is an explicitly socialist platform. So, we're pretty unapologetic about it.
Well, that's going to earn you a lot of points around here. So the next question we have, I think, is really interesting. We have a member who asks, are you in favor of introducing legislation to repeal the provisions of the Hatch Act that prevent working class Americans with good federal jobs from running for or assisting in the run for partisan office? Without such repeal, a federal jobs guarantee would largely disempower the working class electorally.
Well, I'd say yes. I alluded to that when I talked about labor law reform. I think there are parts of the Hatch Act that we need to keep. You can't have politicians using government buildings as props for their election campaigns or public monies to fund their election campaigns. I mean, the Hatch Act prohibits a lot of that nonsense, which Trump is violating every which way he can. But as it affects the ability of working people to participate in the democratic process, yeah, those provisions should be repealed.
All right. So we have another member who says, how do you see the Green Party fitting into the broader movement to restore democracy?
Why don't you go with that one, Angeles?
Yes, this is my home state is one of the states that we're battling for ballot access, which I just find like ironic, painful, and enraging. But I think it's like what I told folks a few weeks ago about running third parties, running fourth parties. You push and you push and you push and you push, and eventually this monolith that is the duopoly is going to fall. And I think that more and more people are waking up to the fact that what we're being offered is unacceptable, that most of the world does not conduct their government in the way that we still do, where there's, you're limited to 2 political parties, and I would argue 1, but I'm gonna leave that alone. 2 political parties, winner take all, and you get what you get. No proportional representation, no ranked choice. It is what it is. And I think that it's outdated. I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that it's outdated. Anytime my aunt asked me, why are there only 2 parties? Why are they trying to push all off the ballot? People want choices, especially now in this year that is so unprecedented in so many ways. And so I think that people understand that a true democracy means giving people choices. Let people run 3rd, 4th, 5th parties. Let people choose, using ranked choice voting. let's introduce, let's abolish the electoral college. Let's get people introducing ranked choice voting, where I think in Maine is one of the places where we'll see it this year, and some other places are enacting it as well. And so I think that the call for an actual democracy, which I would argue we have not had before in this country, is getting louder and louder this year.
Yeah, I would say the Green Party fits into the movement for instant runoff voting or ranked choice voting. That's been where the Greens have played a leadership role in a lot of the efforts to get it. There are 23 cities and counties that now have it. It's now in Maine, including in this presidential election for the electoral votes. And it's on the ballot in Massachusetts. And the Greens are really, that's the main thing they're doing in this election in Massachusetts. And I think that's crucial. I think what the Greens, or at least our campaign, is talking about is we got to stop thinking about ranked choice voting just for single offices. We need to also apply it to legislative offices, where you use ranked choice voting from multi-member districts to get proportional representation. That would be the real game changer, because then the Green Party, the Libertarians, we would have a multi-party system then. And I think that's where the next step in that movement is. And then we got a serious problem of voter suppression. Everybody know about the Republicans. They're purging the voting rolls, disproportionately people of color and young people that would likely vote Democratic. They don't put enough polling places in minority communities. So it's people in minority communities, you got to wait all day to vote, whereas in the suburbs, there's no wait. And all that kind of monkey business that secretaries of state and have imposed on county boards. And then you have, like in 2016, 75,000 votes in Detroit were not counted. And that's because the Secretary of State and Republicans sent in scanners that were broken, so they couldn't be scanned. And so those ballots were set aside. And then it wasn't Clinton and the Democrats, it was the Greens that sued to get those votes counted. And when they got to court, the Republican Secretary of State said, well, you got a different number of votes in the precinct than went through the scanner. Yeah, the scanners were broken. And that's why you should have a recount. That's what the Green Party argued. But the judge ended up siding with the Republicans and saying, yeah, there's a discrepancy there. Something's fishy here. We're not going to count those ballots. And the Clinton lawyers were in the courtroom, and the judge actually asked them, well, do you want to say anything? And they said, oh, no, we're just observing. That 75,000 mostly black vote in Detroit, there was only a 10,000 margin between Trump and Clinton in Michigan. And then the Democrats turn around and blame us. Party suppression is what the Democrats do, and that's a form of voter suppression. 61% of Jill Stein's voters in 2016, according to the exit polls, would not have come out to vote. We bring new voters to the polls, but the Democrats are very actively suppressing us. In half a dozen states, we're in court. Here in New York, Andrew Cuomo, under the cover of the pandemic, tripled the number. You got a law passed with the state budget in April, tripled the number of votes we need to get to stay on the ballot, doubled the frequency from every 4 years to every 2 years. And if we lose the ballot line, tripled the signatures, 45,000 good signatures in a 6-week window. That's as hard as any country in the state. That's your Democratic liberals. And the way the New York Times described it in their headline when they got wind of this plot by Cuomo, they called it the Democrats' secret plan to kill third parties. So we have a serious problem here, and I could go through a lot. People should read Greg Palast's latest book, How Trump Stole 2020. He goes through a lot of these stories. That people think they're registered to vote. They go to vote, they get a provisional ballot, it's never counted. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. He figures there's 17 million voters that have been dropped from the rolls or votes won't be counted. It's huge. So that's something, that fight to make sure the ballots are counted, that people have a mail-in ballot, that all of us who are younger and feel we can wear the mask and go be poll workers should do it so there are enough polling places, or be there to defend people who might be intimidated. In Utah, I would expect some, Republican official looking people to be there when Latinos show up. And even Latinos that are legitimately citizens and registered to vote may have think twice about going because they get in trouble and in an investigation and some of their family members might get caught up in the system. So this is a huge issue. I mean, the fight for democracy. Last thing I'll say is that you can't have political democracy without socialism, without economic democracy, because that concentrated economic power in the billionaire class translates into political power. And I'm not just talking about campaign contributions and buying lobbyists. I'm talking about financing the damn government. When Clinton first got elected, he had a modest reform program, but Robert Rubin, his economic transition guy from Goldman Sachs, said, hey, Wall Street doesn't want your modest investments in infrastructure and schools and your middle class tax cuts because they want balanced budget conservatism. And Clinton then said, according to Bob Woodward in the agenda, you mean to tell me I can't implement my reform program and get reelected because of a bunch of fucking bond traders? Yeah, that's how the system works. That power is not up for election. And I could give you more stories, but as socialists, you're probably familiar with them. We can't have political democracy without the economic democracy of socialism. So that's part of the democracy movement. And hopefully the Green Party as an eco-socialist party can contribute that to people that are concerned about voter suppression or instant runoff voting or ranked choice voting and so forth.
All right. And that leads really well into this next question. We have a member who asks, with the corporate Democrats and Republicans trying to get you off the ballots and rigging elections, how would you counter their actions in order to win elections? That, and what is your stance on the current rise of right-wing militias and their members like Kyle Rittenhouse?
I think there are some things that are embedded in the fiber of this country. And I think that, the rise of militias, this isn't new. This is something that has been happening for the last 500 years. Who did they send out after enslaved people who, ran legitimately trying to find their freedom? This is not a new thing. And, the fact that we're seeing these I think it's like what Howie mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, is white folks are finally seeing it. Black people and Latinx people have always known this. These tactics have always been used on us in our own communities. We are always aware of this. I have people in my family that can tell stories about great-grandparents being run off of their land at night by night riders. So this is not, this isn't new. Their boldness isn't even new. I mean, you've got someone emboldening them from the top who is enforcing this idea. But I think even more deeply than that, we still in this country don't believe that certain groups of people are even people. And we have to accept that it's okay to go into these communities and put down these rebellions because these folks have no business rebelling. You're supposed to toe the line. You're supposed to, you're not a full person in this country. And so I think that it's deplorable to speak to militias. I think that it's something that is typical of this country. And I think it's something that we're not going to see the end of until we get honest about what this country is built on. And racism and capitalism and all of those things are built into the way that this country moves. And we're not going to see anything change until we change that. And as far as confronting the duopoly about pushing us off the ballot, just being honest with people that this is that party suppression is voter suppression. And that if you as a voter are interested in having a choice and having an actual democracy. This is something you need to be mad about. Question why there's only two parties being offered to you, and why during a pandemic, neither one of these parties has put forth policies that actually build the infrastructure that is lacking in this country, as far as healthcare, as far as making sure that people are not going to be evicted, as far as safe return to school, or the infrastructure to make it so that, you know, students from pre-K all the way up are able to learn, and their educators are able to teach safely during this pandemic. None of that infrastructure exists, and neither of these parties has a reason or feels like they need to explain why it's like that, or why they haven't created policies to do that. And for the Democrats to take things off the table, like Medicare for all, even the diluted, watered down version that they gave people during a pandemic, for me, that signals their contempt of people, you know, of the voter, or of the electorate. They don't have to give folks what they want or are looking for, and you're still going to line up and vote for them anyway, so it doesn't matter. They don't have to listen to you. And so I think that what we are doing is talking to people about it. We keep pushing the issues, and we keep raising the fact that we are the only party that is talking about the things that we are talking about. We are the only party that is offering a full strength Green New Deal. We are the only party that is offering Medicare for all as a community controlled health service, national health service, versus something that brings in big insurance companies, big pharma, and everything else, and doesn't change anything. We are the only ones that are talking about nuclear disarmament and de-escalation and changing the way that we move in the world. And we're the only one that's actually listening to people. So I think that when it comes down to countering what, you know, the two parties are pushing us off, we have, I think, made a big deal about the fact that, of course, you're pushing us off. We're a threat to you. If we were as insignificant as you try to say that we are, you wouldn't go all out the way that you're doing to make sure nobody hears from us. The media erasure, and a lot of people think, you know, y'all just have to try harder. We are. There's a concerted effort to make sure that third and fourth parties are not on the debate stage, are not getting the same media attention. This is not by accident. And so I think when it comes to countering that, it's just telling the truth, that there is an intentional effort to make sure we're not being heard, and that if we really weren't a threat, they wouldn't go to the lengths that they do to keep us silent.
Yeah, I think the way we're going to beat the duopoly is from the bottom up. We can beat them in local elections. There are 129 elected Greens around the country. It's more than any independent party on the left. You have to go back to the heyday of the Socialist Party. But it's still a drop in the bucket. There's 500,000 elected officers in this country. We should be electing thousands as we go into the 2020s. And we can beat them there. It's door knocking, not money, to get you elected to town and city councils and school boards. And then you got an institutional foothold, and people see you. And then you're credible when you run for state leg or Congress. And I think we can beat them that way. The way we're going to do it is build real local parties, a real base, where we're actually going out and talking to people, not just when the election comes around, but all the time. So when the election comes around, they know who we are, they trust us, and they know we have people's best interests in mind. Another thing, every district, the way they gerrymander it, in the rural areas, the Republicans win. In the urban areas, Democrats win as a general rule. But in every one of those districts, the minor major party doesn't run serious campaigns because they don't think they can win. The Greens can step in there and run serious campaigns around issues, which the major party candidates don't do too much. They talk a lot of BS and say they went to the high school and lived there all their lives. That's kind of what goes on in local elections. We bring issues and it upsets everything, but it gets a debate started. And that's half the battle, because we can win those debates. As far as the militias go, I think we need to think about getting if we're in power, we got to use the FBI and DHS to monitor and obstruct these militias the way Reconstruction, the Union Army was supposed to do during Reconstruction and failed to do. That's one thing. And then we got to clean house, because the biggest right-wing militias are law enforcement, these police departments, Border Patrol, and ICE. And in fact, the right-wing militias are basically the rejects from the police departments, but they recruit people to police. You know, a lot of these guys, they're in the militias, they were so screwed up, the police didn't even want them. Really? I'm in Timothy McVeigh country. I've had encounters with these guys. And so that goes back to community control. If we don't have community control of the police and they police themselves, you know, they're gonna, this racism and bias that they have and this whole warrior mentality they bring is gonna continue. And then finally, I think we should talk about revolutionary nonviolence. You know, nothing helps Trump and the right wing more than, you know, some looting and, you know, arson. It makes it sound like that's what the movement's really about. And the leadership of these movements hasn't called for that. That's been spontaneous, or it's been criminals. I know here in Syracuse, 2 blocks from where we were demonstrating, the looting went on. And they say, we did it, but we didn't. It was some other people that took advantage of the situation. So I think we need to emphasize that, because right now, I mean, there's some stupid people, in my opinion, getting written up in publications like The Nation and being interviewed on NPR that are saying looting is a form of liberation. You know, as if, you know, like in Kenosha, what was it? I was looking at this, no, it was Minneapolis. You know, they were not only burning down the police station, they burned down a library. They burned down a post office. And we know a lot of those people were not from the neighborhood. So I think that's something else we got to emphasize, or otherwise we're going to play right into these militias and they're going to shoot at us, even when we're nonviolent, because some other people are doing some stupid stuff. So I think if you study revolutions, they generally win by being nonviolent, the main thrust of the movement, and they win over the armed forces. When they pick up the guns and try to beat the organized military of the state, they're usually defeated, even if it's a bloody civil war. So I think that's something else to keep in mind in the long run.
All right, thank you for that. We have another member who asks, the Green Party's general platform appears to be pro-gun control. What's your personal stance on gun regulation? Either of you, both of you, whichever. If elected, what steps, if any, would you take regarding access to guns for the working class? And are you in favor of establishing community armories and solving the root evils of capitalism and white supremacy that cause gun violence, like the Rose Caucus, that's a caucus of the DSA, proposes?
Well, I guess Angela's looking at me. I'll start with that. At least in our campaign, we are willing to work within the framework of the Heller decision. People who are law-abiding should have the right to shotguns, rifles, pistols, but the public also has the right to regulate them in the interest of public safety. Now, the community armories idea, I haven't seen the Rose Caucus proposal. An interesting idea, because, you know, the militias, even though a lot of them were, you know, about enforcing slavery in the South and suppressing popular rebellions in the North, the idea was, you know, that was for self-defense, but the arms were regulated. Interesting idea in this in modern context, but you know, I think there are regulations that are reasonable, like universal background checks, so that crazy people don't get guns, or people that are angry don't, you know, get a gun when they're angry and go shoot somebody. Whereas if there was a waiting period, they might chill out. And then, being a former Marine, I don't think, you know, my M16 or AR-15 today should be on the street, because that is such a dangerous weapon. It can kill so many people so fast. When somebody wants to do a mass killing, they get a lot of people killed before they can be stopped. And so I'm for a gun buyback program with regard to military assault rifles. So, but I'm fine with people having their firearms. It just has to be regulated in the interest of public safety. And I think we also have to recognize that the roots of gun violence in this country is not the fact that people have guns so much as the fact that people are angry and alienated and using guns as a solution. And we have a militaristic culture. We have a chauvinistic, male chauvinistic culture where people, want to be John Wayne or Rambo or somebody. I mean, people come up with that mentality. Maybe this kid Rittenhouse was like that. When I was in the Marine Corps in boot camp, they threw those people out because they were dangerous to the unit. An infantry unit, you don't want Rambo. You want people that will work together and work as a unit cohesion. So, even the Marines would reject people who were too militaristic or chauvinistic or just wanted to be the Rambo. Although I was in there before Rambo came along. Anyway, you probably have something to add, Angela.
No, I think you covered it pretty comprehensively.
All right. We have another member who asks, the Green Party has always had a streak of leftist ideology and values since its founding. Yet it's undeniable that a large amount of green liberalism and movements less concerned with working class politics has also been widespread in the Green Party. Why do you think the Green Party is a good room for leftists who are done with dealing with the Democratic Party?
Well, I think two things I would say is, that we've always had that, socialist versus liberal division and debate going back to the 80s. But over time, the left has strengthened. The liberals have gone back to the Democratic Party. And those liberals that remain are basically opportunists. They want to be big fish in a little pond. And they tend to be the leadership in the Green parties that really don't have a base. They're paper parties, frankly. The other thing is, I think the most important thing for socialists right now is class independence. We have lost that concept. That's the first principle of socialist politics. Going back to the address to the League of Communists by Marx after the 1848 revolutions. They got sold out by the middle class in those revolutions. And so Marx is saying we need our own party to act and speak for ourselves. And that principle we've lost. We have so many members of the Communist Party. DSA was this way for a long time. I know it's changed a lot, but that was the legacy of the realignment strategy of the Socialist Party in the 50s and 60s. And then we had the McGovern New Politics people and the Jackson Rainbow Coalition people, and now the Bernie Political Revolution people. And they get lost in the sauce. By the time they get into the Democratic Party, they're supporting Biden, who is no damn socialist. And even Bernie Sanders has compromised his signature issue, Medicare for all. Now he says, well, I'll accept the compromise, 55 and older and children, and in between, we'll do the ACA with a public option, which is a huge compromise. And that just tells us that the people that go into the Democratic Party to change it get changed by it. And there's a long history of that going back to the People's Party when they cross-endorsed William Jennings Bryan, who had some populist rhetoric, but he really wasn't a populist. And it killed the People's Party. So I think that's the other thing. The Greens are politically independent. They're real clear about that. They won't take corporate money. They're not Democrats or Republicans. And that inherently radicalizes them and pushes them to the left. And I'll add one more thing. I think more and more Greens have come to understand that if you're concerned about the environment, you can't have capitalism, which is a system of boundless growth. It's like cancer until it kills its host, the biosphere. And more Greens recognize that. But that's been an education process. So I think the Greens are not as big as what we need. A lot more forces have to come together. But I think where there's a ballot line, that's a place where socialists should use that ballot line to run candidates against the two capitalist parties.
Angela, do you have anything to add?
No, I concur.
All right. So this is for either, do you see yourself as a socialist? Obviously. How do you understand socialism, and how does that understanding shape your answer to the previous question?
I'll go with that one because I was just asked that question earlier this evening. I describe myself as a Fred Hampton, Assata Shakur socialist. And I do that to honor the history of, the fact that the movements for Black liberation in this country have been socialist. And it also is a transfer of, you understand and study theory because it's necessary, but you also have to put that into practice, and you have to make it plain in the communities that you're in. And so, taking what you understand and speaking plainly to people, putting these issues in people's hands, and also using the tenets of socialism to meet people's material needs. Like when you start, like what I said, going back to what I said earlier, when you say socialist to people, a lot of people get their backs up until you start talking about issues that, or entities in their neighborhood, or entities in their community that serve them. Then they calm down. It's like, oh, that, okay. Then it's not so scary. And so, when you, how do I want to say this? You want to put people at ease, but you don't want to compromise your beliefs either. I am unapologetically a socialist. I am openly socialist. I've lost friends for being socialist, and they weren't my friends. But just understanding that community control and democratic community control and respecting the right to self-determination of communities is at the heart of socialism. As long, and of course, owning the means of production and deciding how things are produced and things like that naturally. But also when you're thinking in a cultural sense, making sure that the entities in your community are something that you have a stake in, you have a direct stake in, and that they are accountable to you. And it's the same for everybody that's there with you. And so for me, it's transferring theory into practice and meeting people's material needs through that practice.
Well, I sort of frame my understanding of socialism around 5 principles. First of all, it's the movement of the working class and the oppressed for self-emancipation. And out of that comes a program. First of all, is democracy. Like the Communist Manifesto said, our struggle is to win the battle for democracy. I agree with Rosa Luxemburg, who said, you can't have socialism without democracy, or democracy without socialism. Or that's a good paraphrase if that's not exactly what she said. Third thing is you got to have socialist economic democracy, social ownership and democratic administration of the major means of production and distribution. And that's how you secure democracy. Fourth thing is it's anti-oppression as well as anti-exploitation. So it's opposed to racism and sexism and all the different forms of oppression, as well as, the exploitation that steals people's labor. And finally, it's internationalist. Freedom, democracy, equality have to be international. A threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so we need to stand with working people's struggles everywhere. And we can't have a socialist island in a capitalist world that will long survive.
All right. I think our members will really like the answers to that question. The next one we have a member who asks, in Senator Mike Gravel's presidential campaign, he talked about the need to move away from representative democracy, where we check a box every 2 or 4 years, and hope the politician does what's in our best interest and transition to direct democracy. Do you agree with Senator Gravel? If so, what would you do as president and vice president to try and bring about that change?
I actually had a discussion with Mike Gravel about that at his
Gravel.
home in California. And he gave me his book, you know, advocating this, basically doing a lot of, you know, national decisions by referendum. And I told him that I believe that that can be done if we have grassroots assemblies like town meetings, where people can actually be educated and talk to each other. If you just have national referendums with big money involved and people are advertising, or these special interests are advertising to people, it's going to distort the process. We see that a lot in California. So I think direct democracy starts with the direct democracy of the citizen assembly, like a New England town meeting. That's the legislative body in those towns. They decide on a budget, they elect their, what they call aldermen, and they are the executive body that carries out the decisions of town meeting. And I think that's, you go back to the Greeks, that's democracy. Elected representative government is aristocracy. If you read Aristotle, you know, that's the way they looked at it. Back those Greek democracies, you know, the citizens, now they didn't include women, they didn't include enslaved people, but they had large bodies of citizens making decisions. And so, and that's what happens in revolutions. You know, they rise up. It was, the town meetings were the cradle of the American Revolution. The sectional assemblies in Paris were the, you know, the power of the French Revolution and the Paris Commune. And, you know, what we got to do is make that permanent and institutionalized. And then when there's a larger issue that deals with more than the neighborhood or town, yeah, referendums are one way to deal with that, but after discussion. And I told Gravel about a book by Benjamin Barber called Strong Democracy, where he talks about how he proposes that you don't get to vote on the referendum until you went to town meeting to discuss it, which is an interesting way of making sure, you know, people know what they're voting on instead of being subject to advertising and lies from special interests. So I think, yes, I know the Socialist Party back in the day had in their platform that we don't go to war without a national referendum. I think that's a good idea. I think Gravel that's part of his proposal. So I think we need the assemblies as well as the referendums.
All right, and we have someone who asks, why isn't Angela running for president? Why is the Black woman gotta always be the sidekick? Do we have an answer from you on that one?
I think Howie, I think Howie would argue about me being a sidekick with two very distinct personalities. And I honestly don't want to be president. I get asked this all the time. I have no desire to be president. And that is, you know, this is who I am. And Howie will tell you, both of us were, you know, every time we've run, we've been drafted. We're not the people who have like walked up and been like, hey, pick me. You know, I'm good for this. No, no, we get called into it. And so I think that he and I are a good balance for one another. I mean, these policies that people are really supportive of, he helped draft them. I mean, come on, you're listening to him. He is like a living encyclopedia. So, you know, we balance one another out. And I am nobody's sidekick, and ever. And I think that within the two lanes that we're in, you know, the strengths that we bring to our roles, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think the order is an artifact that I got drafted first. And I was looking for a teammate, not just anybody. There are people in my campaign team saying this person and that person, is a minor personality. There's nobody like Ralph Nader, that had a big name recognition. But I said, no, I know Angela Walker. I've known her for 6 years. And I know she's somebody I could work with well. Yeah, to bring in a stranger wouldn't have been a smart move, because this is we got to work as a team. And my instincts were right. Angela and I have worked more closely together since April than we ever have. But that was the biggest, most important criteria for me, is that somebody I know knows the issues, can articulate them, and, work with a team. And Angela can do that. So 2024, maybe Angela will be the one that gets drafted first.
And I'm gonna address that because I saw that in the chat about, and I have nothing but love for Senator Turner. This is my electoral politics swan song, and I want people to be very clear about that. I'm done. This is not fun. So, we y'all want us, we better get it this year, because I'm done with this. There will be no Angela 2024.
She said that in 2016 too, but the future, we'll see what the future brings.
So here's a more personal question for you two. What particular experience in your past would help you the most, I assume, with the office of the presidency and vice presidency?
I think for me, my experience as legislative director, the fact that my union president was also, a tall white guy, and people didn't realize that I served. My position was not elected, I was appointed. And I had a lot of experiences where people talked over me or around me like I wasn't there, until my president would be like, oh, and you've met our legislative director. And it's like, this is the person you need to be talking to. And I just smile at him. And so I think that what that taught me about the need for diplomacy, what it taught me about the fact that as a Black woman, people are going to not expect me to know what I know. They're not going to expect me to be in the position that I'm in. There's going to be a level of condescension that people handle me with. All of those things, it began toughening my skin. So I think that, as vice president, those are things that would not get to me because I see them coming. And I've learned to work around it and be tactful and diplomatic and still get my point across with no problem, without, stabbing people with it. So.
Well, I would say, and this is for both of us, we're two workers for the White House. And we're going to put a better class of people in there than the corporate crooks and flunkies we've always had in there. We know what most people are going through and what they need. So I think we'd be more attuned to what the people want rather than the special interests.
All right, well, we're just past 8 o'clock. I understand, I believe Angela has another commitment, or Howie does, or
She got to go to work in 6 hours. She needs to get to bed.
Oh,
but I can stick around for questions. I'm all right.
Yeah, so if we, I'm thinking we have a fair number of people in the call here. I would probably be open to it if everyone can agree to, be nice. I would love to open the floor to questions from people who are on the Zoom call right now. So if you are interested in asking a question, I would love if we could, oh, Angela?
This is me. I want to duck out because I literally have to be at work at 4:30 a.m. And it is 10 p.m. where I'm at. So I want to thank all of you for having us. I want to thank you for your really excellent questions, and thank you for the invite and solidarity. I'm going to bed. Y'all take care.
Thank you so much, Angela.
Good night.
All right, so if everybody in here who is interested in asking a question or talking to Howie, we've got him. So, go ahead and raise your hand or let us know in chat if you have a question, and I'm happy to have you on mute. If I don't have any takers, I have a few more questions before we move on to.
I'm actually raising my hand.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, and Freeman too. Okay, so Johnny, this is or rather, Johnny, what's up? What questions do you have?
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of make a comment first. So first off, sir, Mr. Hawkins, of course, I'm linking into this meeting from a public bus. I just got off work, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to be on the entire call. But either way, I just want you to know that it's a great honor to be on this Zoom call with you, sir, and myself, like many others in this meeting, are certainly. At this point, you're pretty much the best hope for this country, because originally we were all pinning our hopes on Bernie until things played out the way they played out. So at this point, you're pretty much the only hope for this country. So help me, Howie Hawkins. You're my only hope. But with that being said, one question I would like to pose is, what is your and Angela's plan on reforming the education system in this country, especially given that this nation has one of the most faulty public education systems the world over? And how do you plan to make education more accessible to the nation as a whole, especially in terms of like trade school education, considering the shortage we have of qualified tradesmen? And then another one is the troubled teen industry. Basically where it's like a system of boarding schools who essentially take unruly, defiant, drug-addicted teenagers and claim to help them, but then don't actually do anything to help them. I mean, those are all like different parts of essentially the same question, but what is yours and Angela's plan to reform all of that?
Okay, well, first of all, really support public education. And in this high stakes testing, which is the wedge to privatization in charter schools, which is a scam. Most of those schools end up, getting in trouble for various crimes, embezzlement, real estate scams, and bait and switch. Once they get through the first review of their qualifications, then they fire the good teachers and hire a bunch of cronies. And they, same thing with the contracts to run the school. So we got to end all that and put the resources into the public schools. And we would shift the funding of public schools from property taxes, which are unevenly distributed between different school districts, to the federal government, paid for by progressive income and wealth taxes, with every school getting a certain per capita, and then high needs schools getting additional resources, community schools with wraparound services, things like that. In addition, we need youth programs, city rec programs. I mean, I was from a single parent family. I was raised in a city rec center that no longer provides the kind of services we used to have in the 60s. And we got to have more public secondary education. You mentioned trade schools, as well as college and continuing adult education. We got to end tracking. Every student should be able to switch between academic and vocational classes and not be tracked into one or the other. I mean, I went to a school where you could do that, but we didn't have the advanced placement college track. I didn't learn about that till I got to college, and half these kids, this was an Ivy League school, they were already juniors by the time I got to my first class as a freshman, because they took these tests and suddenly they had all these credits. And we didn't have no advanced placement in my school. Every school should have those resources. In New York City, because of tracking, 2/3 of the high schools don't have physics classes. And they start tracking them in kindergarten. They got an industry where they have, the people who can afford it are having their kids test prepped as 4-year-olds. So when they turn 5, they can get into high track in kindergarten. It's insane. I mean, when I went to kindergarten, the last day, they had this book that was bigger than us. It was Dick, Jane, and Sally and Spot. I don't know if you guys are old enough to have gone through that, but that was like what everybody read in first grade. We just learned how to play in kindergarten, and get along and take a nap and be quiet, all those things. So I think the pressure on students, is another thing where, to get into the right track, get in the right class, get in the right school. We should have all the schools providing all the resources. Those are some of the reforms. We got to pay teachers enough. I know Bernie Sanders was talking about a starting salary of $60,000. I think that's reasonable. These are, people with at least master's degrees in most states. So they should be well paid. So it's an attractive occupation. For people from communities, a lot of times we have, like in Black communities, not many Black teachers. So the kids don't have role models there, or people, more importantly, they can talk to, that understand where they're coming from, what they're going through. So I think those are some of the things. We need a Department of Education that sets a tone around all those policies. And then we need civil rights enforcement. In fact, we need federal legislation to break down the race and class segregation, which has grown since the Fair Housing Act, since Brown v. Board of Education. We actually have more class segregation for sure, and since 1980, race segregation residentially, which translates into schools. And there were court decisions in the early 70s that basically said you can't, bus or move students across school districts for the purpose of integration. Well, we need to change that legislatively so that we can change the districts. I mean, I'm in a neighborhood right now, and when you get to the eastern boundary of it, you go over that boundary and the schools are well-funded, very affluent, and their kids being bused from just this side of the school district boundary that way, and kids on this side of the boundary are being bused this way, and they live within a stone's throw of each other. But that municipal boundary is it's like the new Jim Crow. And in fact, that's going back to the police. We got to get the police out of the schools and get some counselors in there. But what the police do now is enforce the new Jim Crow, which is basically keeping downscale people down, and particularly Black people down, and out of the upscale communities. And those communities are defined by school district lines and municipal lines, and within larger cities, neighborhood lines. And so desegregation of the schools has to be renewed. We never really did it. We started to do it for a minute, basically in the 70s, and then we retreated. And that's why we have such unequal schools. So those are some of the education policies. If you go on our website, howiehawkins.us, and look at the Economic Bill of Rights, where we talk about the right to an education, lifelong right to an education, we have a whole list of bullet points, most of which I probably hit, but there are probably more on there I forgot.
All right. So thanks for the question, Johnny, and thanks for that response. I've got Freeman Stevenson. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question, you're next. And then I've got a couple questions in chat that we can do after that. So Freeman, what's up?
Hi, just the roof. So Howie, what you said about internationalism being a core tenet of what you consider to be socialism really resonates with me. And I also know you had in the past known Murray Bookchin, and I know you have also stated your support for the Autonomous Administration of Northeastern Syria, commonly known as Rojava. I am a veteran of the YPG. I served for roughly a year back in 2016 in the fight against ISIS in the militia. And anyone following the news knows that the United States military's presence in the area has both allowed this popular people-based movement to survive ISIS, but has also sanctioned ethnic cleansing by the hands of the Turkish government there. I basically just want to know if you somehow found yourself in position of presidency, what do you think are appropriate actions, and what do you think is the role of the United States, particularly the military, which I know we also want defunded for legitimate reasons, in situations like these, in supporting these populist movements for liberatory socialism and democracy?
Well, I think that's part of internationalism. You know, when the Cubans went to Angola to fight the South Africans in apartheid, nobody on the left criticized that. Unfortunately, in this country, we have a part of the left that says the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And their enemy is US imperialism. And they think anybody fighting the US, no matter how dictatorial, repressive, right-wing they are, like the Assad patrimonial regime in Syria, we have to defend it. No, we don't. Not as socialists. We defend the working class and the oppressed. And the Kurds are oppressed nationally by the Assad regime. And now the Turks have gone in there with the permission of Donald Trump. So I've spoken on panels with other YPG veterans from the United States. You know, when people volunteered during the Spanish Civil War, the left saw that as a good thing. Today, much of the left can't even conceive of that. It's no longer internationalist. It's part of the new Cold War. You know, they're just picking the other side, you know, and the left should have no part of that, you know, geopolitical rivalry. We should be with the class struggle and the struggle against different forms of national oppression. So with respect to Syria specifically, I would think a left government should at least, you know, give the Kurds the arms they need to defend themselves and to negotiate some kind of new dispensation with the Syrian government going forward when the war is over. And I think that experiment in the Rojava region, you know, that's the most progressive force in the Middle East. They are anti-sectarian, anti-nationalist. They include ethnic minorities in their administrations. They share power between men and women in leadership positions. They have grassroots democracy. They're committed to ecology and socialism. And given the religious sectarianism and the nationalist competitions in that part of the region, the internationalism and the anti-sectarianism of that movement is really important. And if it can establish a foothold, it can set an example for the rest of the Middle East, which I think when you get to the rank and file people, they hate their regimes. They hate the West too. But they don't hate their neighbors so much. We saw that in Iraq. You know, the Shia-Sunni thing broke out because the U.S. occupying forces forced people to identify themselves and gave the power to the sectarians, and they got into a sectarian war. That's not the kind of intervention that we're talking about. So I know right now that Trump moved out of Rojava and then moved down to the oil fields and grabbed them. And we got to condemn that. He should not have moved just because Erdogan told him to, his buddy. So those are some of my thoughts about that situation. And I think all of us should, you know, study what they've done. It hasn't been perfect, but it's the best hope. It's the most progressive force that's, you know, actually got a lot of people and, you know, some arms to back it up that no other political party or movement in the Middle East has. And it's something I wish the whole left supported. A lot of the left that has this enemy of my enemy is my friend philosophy tries to ignore what's going on there because it's so clearly on the left. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Howie.
All right, and the next hand I have is Deborah Gressett. Deborah.
Yes, I have one question. Okay, I have one question. Will you or are you registered as a write-in in all states?
In all states where we can do write-in and we're not on the ballot. We're on the ballot now in 34 states, and we're in court in about 5, and the rest we're filing for write-in. Now, there's some states where they don't count write-ins. South Dakota's one, Nevada's another. We're in court in Nevada, but it doesn't look like, unlike a lot of election law, this is going to move in time. That was the state we're trying to get relief in this coronavirus environment. And Nevada's legal system is something else. So in most states, almost all states, you'll be able to vote for us. Most on the ballot, some are write-in, and maybe 2 of them not at all. But you'll be able to vote for us in Guam. We just got confirmation we'll be on their advisory ballot, which sometimes the left ignores Guam. But actually, the socialists last time, they got 4 or 5%. So maybe with our anti-climate change platform, we'll get more Guamese to vote for us. So yeah, that's been, getting on the ballot has been our fight since we got the nomination July 11th. It's been, that's all I worked on today. There's a lot of paperwork. We got the legal challenges. And then there's, you know, the difficulty of getting a petition drive together. We got to get 5,000 signatures in Kentucky by Friday, 37,000 some odd in Arizona by Friday. Friday's the last deadline in Rhode Island, Kentucky, Arizona. I think those are the last 3.
All right, so we have a question from Isa that was put in the chat. Isa, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, or would you want me to read that aloud for you? Okay, well, you should be able to unmute. Oh, you can't unmute. Okay. All right, so Isis asks, without watering down the platform and your belief system, how do you propose to reach the typical Republican and Democratic voters whose votes you need to win this election and bring about the change we need? A small number of folks actually consider themselves Green Party voters, and I would absolutely love to see that change. But with the current numbers, I don't see how it can happen. What's the plan to capture more of the electorate? And thank you for taking the time to read this.
Well, I think one thing we need to recognize is that our platform, in many respects, is supported by the majority of Americans, and the Democratic and Republican parties on the other side of those issues, like Medicare for all, like a Green New Deal, like taxing the rich, like legalizing marijuana, like ending corporate welfare, like getting out of these endless wars. I mean, there's so many issues. And the big problem of American politics is that public opinion doesn't translate into public policy. The reason people vote for Democrat or Republican is they think the Greens can't win. It's a psychological thing. And I think the way we beat that is by electing, as I said, thousands of local Greens and other independent leftists to local offices. We go into the 2020s. And then when those people in those local communities say, I'm running for state legislature or for Congress, people say, yeah, I mean, we got them on city council, we got them on a school board, they're doing a good job. And so then that's how we beat the Democrats and Republicans. It's really more psychology than policy. We don't have to water down our program. I think we're speaking for the majority of people, what they really want. It's more a psychological thing. They say, well, the Greens, they pat us on the back, keep fighting, but then they go vote, progressives for the Democrat. And I think the other thing I'll say is when you get beyond labels, you know, socialism, capitalism, conservatism, whatever people call themselves, and talk about concrete issues. You know, a lot of those Republicans, I've worked with Republicans, even members, we have a conservative party in New York, which is sort of the right-wing lobby on the Republican Party. But when it came to Medicare for all, or kicking out our investor-owned utility and getting a public power utility, we have 50 of them in New York, but our rates are 3 times higher than the municipal utility in the village adjacent to Syracuse called Solvay. And because of that, Solvay is full of factories, and the rest of the county, we're a rust belt. And, you know, these conservative party people, it was just like, you get beyond the labels and look at, you know, public power made a hell of a lot of sense, and they could see it. So I think we can win those people over. And it's a matter of doing it at the local level and doing it at the local level all over. Because when people know us, then the labels and the smears don't matter, because they say, well, no, I know those people, and they're good people, they're for the people. And I might not agree with them on everything, but, you know, we can work with them. I think that's what we got to do. So it's a matter of grassroots organizing, winning local offices, and building our power from that level. And I think that's how we get a lot of, excuse me, Democrats and Republicans. The other thing I'll say is the biggest pot of votes are those that don't vote. That 100 million people that didn't vote in 2016, disproportionately working class, people of color, and young. And those are the people that will be the mass base for a left party. And there are more of them than there are Democrats and Republicans now. So I think we need to do that as well.
All right, and we have some questions in the chat from people who it doesn't look like. Oh, we have a question from Charlie Erickson. Charlie, do you want to ask that yourself, or I'm happy to read it for you?
I guess I can ask it myself. So I identify as queer, and I just was wondering what like issues or like programs or reforms or what have you do you have within your platform that would promote queer liberation?
Well, at the policy level, we got to get the Equality Act passed. It's passed the House, stuck in the Senate, and that would end, it would extend to all sexual orientations and gender identities, the non-discrimination and civil rights provisions in all federal law and regulation. And that would give those communities the power to fight in court to protect their rights. Second thing is the tone at the top has got to change. You know, for example, Trump saying trans people can't serve in the military after they were serving in the military, and the military was accommodating them to some extent. So that's another thing. And then I think the attitudes, I think, there's an issue, and it's come from a part of the Green Party, small part, but they say that trans rights are in conflict with women's rights. And we say that's bullshit. You know, trans rights are human rights, and they're not in conflict with women's rights. And, we can deal with that. So, those are my thoughts. Too bad you didn't get to answer that while Angela was here, who identifies as queer and knows those issues, by direct experience and participation in that movement that I don't. But, that's the way I'd answer that question.
All right, we have Trent Weber or Weber, let's see, seen it different ways, who has a question.
Hi there, Howie. Thank you for doing these questions with us. I've got 2 questions for you. One is, what would you do to help support animal rights, particularly factory farming rights for animals? And my second question is, what is your opinion on sex workers, and what would you do to help protect sex workers' rights?
Okay, I'll answer the second one first because it's a shorter answer. We want to decriminalize sex work on the New Zealand model, not the Nordic model, where the sex worker isn't necessarily breaking the law, but the person paying for the service is, which brings the sex worker into a crime scene and creates problems. Whereas in New Zealand, among consenting adults, it's not regulated. So that's what we do about sex work. And then as far as animal rights and factory farming, we have a section of our Green New Deal that would really transform agriculture. We want to get away from corporate farming, factory farming, chemicalized farming with biocides, and to organic farming, and do it in a way where the people working the land own their farms. Mostly individual farmers, could be cooperative farms. Get corporate farming out, and then support the transition of farmers to organic, which rebuilds the soils, which sequesters a lot of carbon that's now in the atmosphere. And that's more labor intensive, so we're going to need about 1 million more farmers. So part of the program is a new homesteading program, so we can get more farmers on the land. A lot of those farmers will probably be immigrants from Mexico and Central America who lost their farms because of NAFTA and CAFTA and these trade agreements, and our support for, Chiquita banana instead of the peasants in, those Central American countries, for example. We want to have the pricing of agricultural commodities be parity pricing. Parity means your costs of production are covered, and the parity price increases or decreases with the cost of production, so that every farmer has an opportunity to get back at least the cost of their production. And then we would have supply management, so we don't have gluts and shortages in the different commodities, and it would cover all commodities, not just those, big industrial commodities, and now get, agricultural support from the federal government, cotton and soybeans and corn, but it would be fruits and vegetables, dairy products, and so forth. And, in that we would get rid of CAFOs and regulate so that animals that are part of the farm ecology are able to live good lives, cattle grazing, chickens out there scratching instead of being penned up in farms and feedlots. Factories and feedlots.
Thank you.
All right. So I believe we also have a question from Joshua Gonzalez. Joshua, do you want to unmute and ask that question?
Yeah, my question was, it was about your opinion on innovating through technology to fight climate change, i.e. inventions, private sector. Well, what I'm trying to allude to is, like we have, a crisis in the ocean, and it's going to come up real fast before policies that we wish we were working to this campaign and others to initiate to save the planet. The thing is, we're going to need the private sector. They're not going to go anywhere. So I'm trying to allude to, innovations, how we're going to have to invent our way out of this climate crisis, it seems, even if we do all the things that I hope your Green New Deal, I don't want to water down Green New Deal, but Green New Deal on steroids, But the thing is, the point is to save the planet. The thing is I saw these machines that are going to have to make ice in places where we're losing ice, and stuff like that. The cruise industry, the Navy. I want want to see uh, uh, technology to save our asses, you know? So I want to know, what is your opinion on that? You know, like with these machines that are gonna have to make ice in places where there was ice, now it's not. And, you know, to use ships and to use artificial reefs, like to throw everything we got. You know what I'm saying? What's your opinion?
Yeah, it was tough hearing you, but I saw your question or your comment in the chat. As far as needing the private sector for innovation, I don't think so. If you are an inventor, first of all, some inventors, you know, they get rich, but most inventors do it because they like to, you know, tinker, and, you know, they have ideas and they want to see them come to fruition. That's the real motivation for real innovators. And their problem is getting capital, and they have to go to venture capitalists who want money back in 3 to 5 years. You go to public banks, public investment, they can have a longer time horizon to give these ideas more time to develop. And if you look at the big innovations, like what we're experiencing now in electronics, this internet, that came out of the military, that was public sector. Most of the medicines come out of research done by the National Institutes of Health, not the big pharma. So I think you don't need the private sector to innovate. Now, they innovate in terms of organizing their production or introducing new technology as it comes because of competition, that's true. But they don't do most of the inventions. It's other people that do that. And those are, you know, a lot of people in universities. And now the universities are, you know, patenting their intellectual property, which makes it harder to get out into the market without the university getting paid a lot of money. I mean, I've talked to professors and they say, I mean, I can't do nothing without, I sign away my life to the university. So I don't think you need the private sector for innovation. And I think the other thing you're talking about is we need new technologies to deal with this climate crisis. As far as clean energy, we've had those technologies. What's happened is the prices have come down. So now, for example, most forms of solar and wind energy cost 2 to 3 times less than nuclear power over their life cycle. And natural gas is more competitive with solar and wind, but solar and wind is starting to beat its price too. So that's what's changed is as these technologies have improved, their costs has come down. That's been the main change. But we do need to deal with not just stop emitting carbon and other greenhouse gases, we've got to draw the carbon out of the atmosphere. And part of that is afforestation, organic agriculture, habitat restoration. But we're right on the edge of how much of that can be done to get us down below 350 parts per million carbon in the atmosphere, which is the standard that James Hansen set, our foremost climate scientist in this country. And he said that's a target. There are other scientists that say we should get back to 300. The industrial level was 275, 280, the pre-industrial level. And the studies show that the most optimistic, we could get the carbon below 350 parts per million if we stopped emitting carbon very soon and then did this carbon sequestration naturally. So by 2100, we get to 350 parts per million. But that is over optimistic. We have a green in, well, 2 greens, David Schwartzman and Peter Schwartzman. David is a DC statehood Green Party member. Peter is a Green Party member in Illinois, an environmental professor, as well as a city councilor in the city. And David Schwartzman is a retired professor at Howard University. And they've talked about accelerating the geological carbon cycle. You know, over a very slow pace, carbon solidifies as carbonates in Earth's crust. And the question is, do we need to accelerate that to deal with the excess carbon we've got? A lot of that carbon is stored in the ocean as it acidifies, and that emits into the atmosphere over a long period of time of hundreds of years. So even if we stop burning fossil fuels, we're going to have carbon increasing. So we may have to do this acceleration. And what they're looking at is basically putting carbonated water in basalt rock formations. That's just like, carbonated water, like you drink. And it takes some energy to carbonate it, but then you put it in the basalt rock formation. And over a few years, almost all of that carbon carbonates. It interacts with the basalt and it becomes a carbonate, a hard rock as part of that basalt formation. And the question is, can you bring it up to scale? I think we have to explore technologies like that to get the carbon levels back down to the safe zone where agriculture continue and we can have human civilization. So I hope that answers your question. I really had trouble hearing it, but I hope that touched on it.
All right. So our next person we have, Deborah, you still have your hand up. Are you wanting to ask another question, or is that from your previous question? All right. Since I'm not getting anything back on that from Deborah, I'll go to Haley Freeman.
I'm sorry, this is Deborah. What do you want?
Oh, you still have your hand up, or are you wanting to ask another question?
Oh, I just forgot to take it down, but thank you.
Oh, thank you. In that case, yeah, then Haley, you have a question for Howie?
Am I good? Okay. So I was wondering, how do you feel about the United States joining with the International Criminal Court or otherwise being held accountable for all of the war crimes that we've done? What are your feelings on how that should be handled?
People that committed crimes should be prosecuted and brought to justice. I think it was terrible that the Obama administration said we're not looking back at the torture done in the Bush administration. And as a result, those torturers, those war criminals, are back in the Trump administration. And so, yeah, we should be part of the International Criminal Court. That court should be looking at the West as well as the South when we're talking about war crimes. And yeah, there are many people, particularly civilian leadership, but also some people in the military that have some crimes to account for. And I think that's part of some kind of truth and reconciliation process we need globally for the consequences of U.S. imperialism.
All right, Haley, does that about answer your question?
Absolutely, thank you.
All right, so I think that's everybody who is on the call right now who wants to ask a question. We're actually a little bit behind schedule on getting a vote up and running, but we should be able to host our live endorsement vote. So Phelan, you designed this little maneuver. Is Phelan still here? Yeah, Phelan, you designed this little maneuver. Can you tell us about how voting is going to work tonight? and you are wanting us to, are we just going to wait 10 minutes? Give people a 10-minute break to go vote. And then we will see how the ballots come back. So how are you planning on sticking around to see if we endorse you?
Can you send me an email? Somebody?
Ooh,
I got my people are calling
sure.
me, and I got a lot still to do. I got a call guy in Alaska. It doesn't stop. Okay, and I would just say that we would proudly put on our website and tell people we got the endorsement if we do. And I enjoyed the conversation, and thanks for having us. All right, have a good evening, everybody.
God bless you, sir. God bless you.
Hey, thank you so much, Howie. It was so great to have you and Angela here. Send her our best.
All right, take care. Bye, Howie.
All right, so I think we're going to take a little 10-minute break now. Let's meet back up here at 8. The 10-minute break already is kind of started, right? We'll meet up here at about 8:55. Give you a little extra time, and we'll see how the vote comes out, and then we will. And I hope everybody sticks around for this because this is where it gets good. We will do regular DSSL general business. Always an exciting maneuver. So I'll sorry. And it is such a wonderful organization. Please join, please pay dues, and we do some really cool stuff here. So, and thank you to everyone who's been watching on the stream. It's good to have your eyeballs for our meeting. So Deborah, the way that you join is, do we have a link for Deborah to follow? You can go to the DSA National website and register to become a member of DSA National. If you are a dues paying member, or if you can't afford it, a non-dues paying member, it's the same membership status. Either way, if you are a member of the national organization, you are welcome in our local chapter of Democratic Socialists of America. And that goes for everybody watching, anyone that can hear me right now. Please, we love you. That's my pitch. So could we get someone to, I'll be back at 8:55 for when that's done, but if someone would put a link into a link for joining, somebody, Phelan or Haley or somebody in the Zoom chat would be great. And is there one on the stream, Phelan? All right, let's do that. And so I guess let's get official about this. I'm going to motion for a recess until 8:55 p.m.
Second.
And do we have any opposed? Okay.
To break?
Yeah, the short break. And then my vision for the meeting is that we get through this really, really quickly. We have, let's get the agenda so that everyone can see it. And
You got the Rona. Also, if this is still streaming, we should probably stop that.
Didn't know my mic was on.
No one will ever want to join us to actually see how we operate.
No, I agree.
No, I just had a cough. Don't worry, guys.
Hey, everybody. We still got 4 minutes on our recess. So this is me informally letting you know it's currently my birthday. Hey, thanks. Happy birthday, Elliot. And I'm currently making a menace of myself by not participating in birthday festivities and instead doing this. So I'm going to have to leave. I will leave you in the hands of the very capable Phelan, who will run through our agenda and get shit sorted and done.
Many years, Elliot.
So thanks. 21 tonight. So don't try and reach me after this. I won't be available till the morning. Yeah. Oh shoot. Okay. If I just leave it open, will it work? Okay. Sounds good.
You could just kill the meeting. I mean,
Okay.
Have fun getting fucked up, Elliot.
Oh, I would never do something so devilish. So, hey, to all the new people, to all the people who watched on stream, thank you so much. It's great to have you. Hope to see you again. Bye.
Bye.
Masochists.
No? Okay. Okay. What was I doing? Oh, so agenda items, sharing screen. I'm sorry, I lost my brain there for a second. Shares. Oh, I can't share my screen, so we'll just have to do it off of, I'll just have to read it out. So the first is the call to order. I'm sorry, the roll call. So do we have any new members to the DSSL in tonight's call? Feel free to unmute yourself and just announce yourself if so.
Hey.
Freeman, you're new? Or was that an accident? Because I'm pretty sure you're not new. So I'm going to take the silence to mean there are no new members on the call, which is fine. A little sad, but fine. Up next is going to be, since there are no new numbers, we can table the Zoom protocol discussion for the next general meeting if there are new members. I believe that is the correct protocol. Haley, can you Slack me the minutes from the last general meeting so we can get those approved? Okay. Sorry, this is my first time running a general meeting, so forgive my overall lack of polish. I do see in the chat, Deborah asked you're at an impasse to become a non-paying member because you can't afford dues. So in the link, which I will post for you again in the Zoom chat, you should be able to, there should be a link on that website that goes straight to the join/pay your dues link on the DSA National website, which is how you join the chapter, is by joining DSA National. So it'll say how to become a member. If you scroll down a little bit, number 1 is a link. Go ahead and click on that, and then choose an amount. I believe you should be able to scroll all the way down to the bottom at the end of the payment form. There's a link which I will post directly for you as well, dsausa.org/dues waiver, and that's how you can apply for your dues waiver to what's the word I'm looking for? Become a member without paying if that's not something within your capacity. You know, DSA understands that not everybody can pay dues, so so just a brief overview, since I can't actually share the agenda, unfortunately. To answer Jessica, I just asked a question for those who are watching the chat. Why do you have to join national, get involved with the state chapter? I believe that's just the way our bylaws are written. If anyone more versed in the bylaws wants to chime in, go ahead. While I pull this up. Okay, so if memory serves, we actually go over the last meeting's minutes. Is that correct, Haley, before we approve them?
Generally, we don't have to go over the minutes in the meeting. It's just that if you were in the meeting and or have caught up via the minutes and you have an issue with it, now is the time to bring it up.
Okay.
Otherwise, we just continue.
Okay, thank you. So does anybody want to make known or motion an issue or objection to the previous meeting's minutes for the month of July? Okay, I'm going to take silence as a no. Going once, going twice, going thrice. All right. Up next on our agenda for today is the current agenda of which we're going to go over. And a call for, does anyone have any additions that are not in the agenda, which I'm about to post in Zoom for those who don't already have it. Going once, going twice, going thrice. All right, no additions. Up next are coordinating committee and officer reports. This is supposed to be done by the coordinating committee co-chairs. So, Johnny, I know you're on the call. Do you have a report as your co-chair role of not engagement? I'm sorry. What is it? Membership that you're co-chair over? Do you have a report for the chapter?
Well, I actually have nothing to report at the moment. Haven't been able to really keep a monitor on new membership.
Okay. That does track because, to my knowledge, there's no new members on this call. That being said, any other coordinating committee co-chairs on this call, do you have any reports for the chapter membership at large? Going once, going twice, going thrice. All right. Do any committee chairs have reports for the chapter at large? Going once, going twice, going thrice. All right. All right. Okay. So that's good. We just sped through a bunch of the agenda. That's going to help us catch up on time. Next thing is business, old business, which for those that are publicly watching, we define as business forgotten or unattended to since the last meeting. Looking over the agenda, there were a couple of things in the old business that we are going to be discussing again tonight, or discussing things related to that. The only thing I'm seeing that we're not already going to have a conversation on tonight in terms of old business, forgotten or unattended to, is the ranked choice voting ballot initiative, which was my baby, and potentially working with the Green Party and other left orgs to do so. As it stands, I'll be honest with you guys and gals and folks, I kind of dropped the ball when I lost my job, then got another one, then lost that one, so my life's been way too hectic. But I will move forward as the chapter already agreed on and come up with the game plan to propose the chapter in next meeting. But that's the only old business I know of that's been forgotten or unattended to. Does anybody else have old business to bring up before we move on to new business? Going once, going twice, going thrice. All right, so calling to order new business. We have a couple of, more than a couple items of new business, so this is really exciting. We have a lot of new business tonight. The very first thing is the eviction moratorium protest at Senator Romney's house that I proposed to the Corcom, and the Corcom agreed to that we should definitely propose it to the chapter on whether or not we should act on it. Now, when it was, I was going to work all day. We had a video, but since I'm here, I'll just go over it. Let me pull up my Agit prop as a frame of reference. 1 second. I'm sorry, people. Yes, we need to table Elliot's business. Okay. So while I'm pulling up the stuff to help me explain this campaign, Can we make a motion to table Elliot's business from this meeting to next meeting?
Second that.
Any opposed? Going once, going twice. Okay, going thrice. Okay, so I had to pull up my agitprop just to help me get in the right mind frame here. Okay. So this campaign would be, if approved by the membership, would be a central campaign of the DSSL, meaning we would kind of rally all, maybe not all, but a majority of our efforts around this. And it does really link in with the existing organizing we're doing, as well as our recent endorsement of Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker in terms of electoral politics. And so this campaign, like I said, I call it the pressure cooker. It's basically, the idea is to annoy our politicians into submission of and make them legislate for the working class by organizing the working class to conduct very direct, very policy-driven protests at or nearby the politicians' houses. It's a tactic that to some degree has been used in California by federal candidates have been kind of doing this to try to force a debate by showing up and pretending to debate at a politician's house. But I think we can take it one step further. So we have basically, oh great, Deborah, that's amazing. For those who are watching the chat, Deborah just got email confirmation as a new member, so we're very happy to have you. Why is this not opening? So like I said, policy driven direct action to annoy our politicians into, doing what we need. So what that means is there are four federal demands that the chapter would be making it for the COVID era. 1, federal eviction moratorium. 2, direct-to-tenant rent assistance payments. And the reason it's specifically coded as direct-to-tenant is we don't want to see a repeat of the 2008 housing crisis where the banks were directly bailed out and everybody lost their homes, their leases and their mortgages and all that. So we want direct-to-tenant assistance payments so tenants aren't violating their leases and the landlords and banks are getting bailed out anyway. 3, extend Medicare to cover all COVID-19 expenses for all Americans. And our 4th demand would be the $2,000 a month to each American basic income until the pandemic is officially resolved as determined by public health organizations. Now, I know Romney's a Republican, and I know some of you may be thinking, why would we pressure Romney? So Romney is kind of the face of the so-called Never Trump Republicans right now. While the Lincoln Project is a bigger face, but in terms of a single politician, Romney is also lukewarm. He acts like he wants to have a spine, but then doesn't. And the third big thing is, despite being a junior senator in the GOP, he has a ton of influence over the party. So if we get Romney to move the needle on any one of these 4 issues, the Republicans in both parties, as I like to say it, will have to react. And it will start a domino process where hopefully we get legislation that provides direct relief to the working class, not just of Salt Lake City and Utah, but of this nation. But we have the power as Romney's constituents to force him to move the needle on this. As such, let me figure out if I can give myself sharing screen powers. Because I want to show everybody the graphics I designed for this rather than tabling that, because that is part of this proposal. But while I'm trying to figure that out, the next part of this campaign is it's not just showing up at Romney's house. Like I said, the plan is for it to be a centralized campaign by our chapter. So what that means is a standing weekly protest preferably on Friday evenings if the chapter can democratically determine that, where we show up at a different politician's house each Friday or whatever, and do a protest and have these clear-cut policy designs and have rally signs and have agitprop and have banners with our demands and that kind of thing. But in addition, once these gain steam, start a second weekly protest that is seemingly random. So it's a different politician's house at a not regular day or time. So the chapter would determine, or maybe the housing committee could determine, okay, let's show up at Governor Herbert's house this week, Tuesday at 7 p.m. or whatever. So the idea is to essentially annoy our politicians into surrender, and we can galvanize Salt Lake to do this, as well as spread class consciousness at the same time, help people see, who don't already, see the possibility for action outside of traditional electoral politics. So that is the proposal. I've taken more than the 10 minutes I had to explain it, so I won't be showing graphics tonight, but I can post them in Slack, and the communications committee can help me refine them if that's what the chapter decides. But the motion is to start the pressure cooker campaign by coordinating with chapter membership at large and the housing committee to plan the first protest at Romney's house. Does anybody have any questions about this proposal before we move on to voting on it? Haley, did you raise your hand?
I did. It is partially question, but mostly comment. I would think that possibly it would be a good idea to change the name, because when you said a pressure cooker campaign, I immediately thought about bombs.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, that might be something worth thinking
I
about.
guess the Boston Marathon did happen,
No,
so.
I was kind of like, oh, let's, so when I think about like a movement to bother politicians and then it's called a pressure cooker campaign, I was like, oof. So that might be.
Okay. We can definitely change the name if that's what the chapter wants. I literally put 10 seconds of thought into the name because I was more focused on nuts and bolts. So that was my bad, everybody. Was that, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Haley. Go ahead.
No, that was it. I'm good. It's
Okay.
Freeman.
Freeman, I see that you commented. You also raised your hand. Do you have something to say or question or whatever?
Yeah, so is the idea just to do Senator Romney's house? Because especially when it comes to things like eviction moratoriums and rent relief and stuff, a lot of that's going to be on the state level.
Yes.
Which Romney has very little say, especially in Utah, because all the Republicans hate him now. So we should definitely look, if it's not already planned, at, shouldn't just be Romney's house, should also do, the governor's house. State senators' houses.
Yep.
Like
so that. I'm sorry I didn't make it more clear. I thought I had alluded to it. Maybe I didn't. But since it would be a standing protest, we would and potentially a second, somewhat more random protest, we would be showing up not just at Romney's house. Romney's house is the first house, but we'd be going through different politicians and maybe even cycling. So we're showing up at their houses more than once by the end of this campaign. The original thought, and of course the chapter can debate on this and choose differently. So, the original thought was Romney first, Governor Herbert second. Since Governor Herbert does have the power to do a unilateral eviction moratorium, he would be a good person to pressure. So yeah. And, sorry, forgot to swallow. As this progresses, there are, key state leaders in the legislature we could pressure the same way. Just think of it as like psychological tactics. My dream for this protest would be showing up with megaphones, our banners, our agitprop, rally signs, which there's a secondary proposal if the chapter approves this regarding those materials. And potentially my trailer with the banners on it, because that would be fun. And literally having people either get up on a parked trailer on top of like a banner SUV and shouting at the politicians and their families. That would be my ideal dream come true, perfect execution of this plan. And we wouldn't do it once, we'd do it repeatedly, and we wouldn't focus on one politician, we'd focus on several. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Cool. Does anyone else? I, right now, for whatever reason, can't actually see your hands raised. So if you have a question or comment, please type a, hand emoji or raise his hand or hand raising or something like that to indicate it within the chat, within the Zoom chat, so I can see it and therefore react to it. Oh, I messed up my green screen. That sucks. Okay. So the motion, again to repeat, since we've covered the debate, seems like. Oh, Johnny raised his hand. Go ahead, Johnny. You got to.
I would say the first thing is I would just make the suggestion that depending on how this goes, we might want to expand this into other areas. Because I don't know, just the more I sit and think about it, the more I think of all the interesting creative directions we could actually take this. So I second it personally.
I think you are very right in thinking that. When we successfully organize this campaign and get, the working class of Salt Lake and Utah to show up and do this, we've just punched open a possibility to continue to do direct action like this, and even maybe this template for other issues. But right now, the chapter's energy and one of the most pressing issues our community faces is housing, especially in the era of COVID. And so the Housing Committee's great work is what inspired the primary demand of this campaign, whatever we decide to call it officially, to be an eviction moratorium, and the secondary demand to be direct-to-tenant rent relief. The other stuff will be helpful, but those are the primary and secondary demands for a reason. And that biggest reason for that, when I was coming up with this, was where the chapter's energy is already at, and the great work of our housing committee already in trying to stop like the mass eviction Hawthorne House, I think it's called. So the motion I put forth, Johnny seconded. Do we have any opposed? Or any more comments? I don't see any more comments.
I would also like to say this comment that and this isn't a talk for now, but this is definitely a discussion that I definitely see us having to have further down the road. But especially with kind of the whole Democratic Party in crisis and kind of how neoliberalism has taken over their platform, we might want to think about doing a direct action like this in front of the state party headquarters to force them to adopt a platform that would put them further on the left.
Okay.
However, this is not. I realize that's not the right discussion for this meeting, but we all might want to be good and well prepared for the time when we do have to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm done
obviously
talking.
the rest of the chapter can chime in here. It doesn't have to be just my face and words. But I think that energy, Johnny, is probably a pretty great energy. But we should try to focus that energy through the power of the Electoral Politics Committee, or I think it's actually a working group, and call that that subchapter of our membership to order, and see what we can organize within that subdivision. And I would again recommend that you take it to Slack if you can, and really start talking with the members of the Electoral Politics Working Group or Committee, whichever it is, and say, hey, this is the issue. What can we do? What should we do? And see if you can get that momentum building within the channel for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just go start trying to get all this stuff organized with the Electoral Politics Committee, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Unless anyone else in the chapter wants to chime in, I just believe that's the most appropriate response. And I know Elliot has echoed that sentiment in the past. So I believe we're on the right track by recommending that today.
Okay, it was just a comment I wanted to make.
Yeah, of course.
But anyways,
So,
I yield the floor.
Back to the motion then. Any opposed to this unnamed campaign to bug our politicians into action? Going once, going twice, going thrice. All right. Since none were opposed, I will iron out some more nuts and bolts and put a proposal in Slack for the date and time of our first protest. Because and let's move on to the secondary proposal that's part of this. Like I said, the dream for this event would be to have yard signs, rally signs, an agitprop produced for us to hand out and have, so we're really visibly present. Now, Elliot's business was to have the banner designs approved by the chapter. We've tabled that, so we can't talk about that. But the secondary motion is whether or not the chapter should, what's the word? Disperse? I think that's the word. Funds, which I put a quote in Slack. It's about including the banners. It's less than $150. But we're not talking about the banners, so it's about $70 for 100 rally signs. Then we'd have our chapter membership print out the agitprops themselves. I believe that is the secondary motion to this primary motion, which is, should we produce rally signs specifically for use at this event, this recurring event. But before we vote on that, I do want to move on to my second piece of business, because it's it's talking about the same thing. Elliot and I were going to talk about this together, but he's not here, so I'll take it over. Dual dues drive, bake sale. Elliot and I have both volunteered to bake, and a yard or rally sign sale. At the production cost of the shop I found, which is an independent, not-for-profit shop that prints progressive signs at cost by a group of volunteers. If we sold 100 of these rally signs, which I will put the designs in Slack, it would net us about 100 of them at, say, $22 a pop, which I know is a little high, but let's just use that as an example. It would net the chapter nearly $1,900 in fundraising. And so that means if less than half of our chapter membership bought one at that price, boom, we've got $1,800 more than we already had. The bake sale would be, we would have to iron out a little bit more. So I want to table the motion I just did about producing yard signs for the protest for a second. And I think it's better if we vote in the order that this was written down. So I guess the motion is, should we focus around a dues drive or a dual dues drive, operating either a bake sale or a rally sign sale or both? And then I want to open that up for discussion by the chapter. Did anyone raise their hand? You could just unmute yourselves. I don't see any raised hands, so anyone? Freeman?
If it's like a choice between one of those, I mean, I like baked goods as much as anyone, but I still feel probably the signs would be the most efficient. People want something they can display. It's a good way of fundraising. Like, it's what we did earlier last year or 2 years ago with the DSA t-shirts. That was our major fundraising, and it netted us quite a bit of money.
Okay. And something I literally just thought of is it may not be wise to do a baked goods sale in the middle of a pandemic. That being said, for anyone who wants to check out the proposed rally sign, although you could use it as a yard sign if you protected it well enough. I just slacked the front and back to the general channel in Slack, so we can take a couple minutes to look at that if we want to while everybody else debates on it. This design was I don't know what the word is, provisionally approved by the Corcom to be approved by the further approved by the chapter at large. So for those who can't get into Slack right now, I'll do my best to describe it. The front side is both of them are all our brand of red for background. The front has Democratic Socialists of Salt Lake, with Salt Lake in larger text for emphasis, followed by small, big, small of our logos, red on white, full color, dark on like gold inlay version, followed by our website in black, followed by the text, small text, don't mourn, large spaced out text, organize. On the back is text that says labor creates wealth, and then for emphasis 2 slashes, and then on the bottom it's 2 slashes in larger text for emphasis labor can take it, followed by a tiled solidarity fist of my own design at a 45-degree angle. So if you haven't already gotten to Slack, go ahead and take a look at them. Does anyone else have any comments on the idea of a rally sign sale, or a comment on the design itself before we move this motion on to voting or seconding and voting? Raise your hand or just unmute yourself, because I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Unmute.
I think you just muted yourself, Freeman.
No, I can talk.
Okay.
So the labor creates wealth, labor can take it is just on the reverse side.
Correct.
Of the Democratic side. Okay, it's not either or.
This would be two-sided. So the front would have all of our branding. The back would be just the labor creates wealth, labor can take it.
Maybe make the raised fist a bit bigger on the reverse side. It just seems like there's a lot of empty space there. Other than that, kind of my only critique.
Okay. Does the chapter want me to go ahead and make the raised fist bigger before we approve this design? Anyone second Freeman's motion?
Make the what bigger?
Look in Slack, Johnny, the raised fist. Although I sent this to you when you're helping me design it. The raised fist on labor creates wealth, labor can take it. I'll just send it to you real quick, Johnny.
I can look in Slack.
Okay.
Are you meaning like, do we want to approve it in the way you originally designed it, or what alteration is being?
The alteration being proposed is that the raised fist is made larger.
Made larger? Let me see.
I do want to point out that from a design standpoint, if we make it larger, the corners, the black corners of the raised fist would then go underneath the text, unless of course we change the angle of the design itself also.
May I interrupt really quickly to say, I would like to motion that we approve your design and then also just approve any tweaks that y'all think are necessary, because I think that it's kind of not necessary for us to approve like every...
We don't have to approve it line by line?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
Just because, I mean, the graphic design, that would be tedious. I
Okay.
think that we should do like in general and then say whatever you guys need to do. I mean,
Okay. I second that. Do we have any opposed? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay. So we will, I guess, then move on to motioning. Do we approve these designs as proposed? That would be the motion now. Right? Yeah. Sorry, guys. My brain's splitting a little. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Any opposed? Haley or Freeman or anyone more familiar with the bylaws, do we need to do a democratic vote on the sale price of these? Or can someone just pick one?
and that is up to your discretion for fundraising and stuff.
Okay. Then I move that the Corcom is granted or uses its existing powers to determine the price for this fundraising
Yeah,
drive.
what we did with the T-shirts in the past was it was a Corcom decision on the final asking price, and I think that's, you got to be efficient.
Yeah. So I move that Corcom does that again, so we can try to speed this meeting along without debating over price points. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any opposed?
So you talk about the price, determining the price, you mean?
Yeah, delegating that to the core committee, the coordinating committee.
Second.
Okay. Going once, going twice, going thrice. All right, none opposed. That's carried. Up next on our agenda, since we tabled the banner designs, that was Elliot's business, and we went over those, are approving the proposed labor committee, new labor committee, and new engagement committees as formal committees of the chapter. I'm going to see if Elliot already shared the proposal docs with the chapter at large. If not, I'll put them in Slack. And so that'll be a motion for the chapter at large, one motion per each. It looks like Elliot didn't get a chance to before he went off to celebrate his birthday, which is fine. I'll put them in there, and I'll also read them because they're super short. Your computer. Okay. This is these are the drafts. I don't think they have the full list of signatures on them, but each of these committees did gain 5 signatures, which is the minimum to form a committee. So for the labor committee, it says we propose the creation of the DSSL Labor Committee. Its mission and powers to monitor, analyze, and improve the situation of Salt Lake workers in the workplace by workplace action and organization, assisting with education, agitation, and organization of the working class in Salt Lake around labor issues. The committee will consist originally of the five original members. End quote. The motion, I guess, is whether or not the chapter approves the creation of the labor committee.
I vote to approve.
Okay, so we have a second. Do we have any opposed? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay. So labor committee has been approved as proposed. Up next is the engagement committee. We propose the creation of the DSSL engagement committee. Its mission and powers to stir engagement in the chapter by planning and holding social events. The committee will consist originally of 5 co-signers. End quote. Do we have a second?
I have a question about
questions, I should say. I'm sorry.
Yeah, is there no longer someone on the Corcom whose role is the engagement member? I know that was a position for the previous Corcoms.
Johnny, who's your co-chair with you on onboarding new members?
Ermea.
That's what I thought. So Johnny and Ermea are on the Corcom, and they're co-chairs of, I think, onboarding, or however it's described. So that does still exist in the coordinating committee. The engagement committee would just be a separate arm that would allow for, I think Elliot put it like, more members involved in the stirring up of engagement. I'm not sure how he put it exactly. This is Elliot's brainchild. Actually, they both are. Credit given where it's due. Elliot and Alyssa's brainchild. Yeah. So, do we have any more questions on the engagement committee? And did I answer your question sufficiently, Freeman?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, going once, going twice, going thrice. I'm really trying to get us all out of here by 9:45, so sorry for the speed if anybody's frustrated by it. Okay, so the motion then is approving or not the creation of the engagement committee. I'll make that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any opposed? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay. So now that we've approved everything, I forgot my motion. I almost forgot my motion that was under the central campaign. Final motion of the night, unless anyone else has one besides me. Does the chapter approve producing 100 of those rally signs for $63.75 plus shipping and tax in order to have a visible presence at our central campaign protests? And if that is carried, do we approve dispersing those funds so I can create the order? Do we have any comments on that before we go to seconds and objections? Going once on comments. Unmute yourselves if you have something. Going twice. Going thrice. Any comments?
No.
Okay. Do we have a second on the production of 100 rally signs specifically for the chapter's collective use on central campaigns?
Second.
Any opposed? Going once. Going twice. Going thrice. Okay. So that means we can move on to general announcements. The first part of general announcements, do we have any labor news from anyone in the chapter? Feel free to unmute yourselves or raise your hand in chat. Okay, I'm trying to get us out of here in less than 4 minutes. So going once, going twice, going thrice. Up next is an open invitation to join DSSL. So that was going to be Elliot, but that's going to be me. So any public viewers who are now or in the future watch this meeting on the public channels that we publicized it to, we would like to extend you a very warm welcome and encouragement to join the Democratic Socialists of Salt Lake. As Delegate Lee Carter said, if it isn't democratic, it isn't socialism. And so if you want to help us build socialism in Utah, turn Utah a much cooler shade of red, and help fight for true liberties, rights, and freedoms for all Americans, especially the working class, feel free to join. You can go to our website, saltlakedsa.org, for all the details. And that is going to be my invitation, open invitation to the world. That being said, does anyone else have any last minute, or maybe not so last minute, general announcements? You can unmute yourselves if so. Going once, going twice, going thrice. All right. I'm just gonna double check the agenda, make sure I didn't miss anything, and give Haley a chance, or whoever is doing the notes, a chance to finish their notes. Okay. That looks like everything. That does look like everything. So I guess that means that the person running the show, the meeting is officially concluded. Thank you for all for showing up and going through the Herculean task of doing a 3.5-hour general meeting. Hopefully we'll see you all next month, last Monday of the month at 6:30. And thank you all.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you too, Johnny. Okay, I gotta kill the stream.